Same conversations with entrepreneurs these days where they say, I already know my client. I've been working this industry for so long. I don't need to go talk to them. But every time they go and actually talk to them, they learn something new and they're blown away. Like, wow, I completely misunderstood what my clients were.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the How to Scale Business podcast. My name is Hector Santi Esteban, and I am your host for today. Our special guest is Mr. Jake Wysocki, and he is the founder of Intention Craft. And we're going to talk about scaling your wisdom, your insights, but I think also your impact along with it as well. So, Jake, thanks for hanging out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Hector. Excited to be here, man.
Catch us up on the key stops along the way in your career, and then let us know a little bit about what you're doing with your clients now.
All right, awesome. So I'll do a few kind of skipping across the pond beats. And if you want to go deeper, just let me know. But I always like to start with I have an engineering degree, mechanical engineering, because that kind of helps you understand what my mindset is, generally speaking, processes, systems, things like that. And I actually took a left turn out of school, went to sales. I always like dropping this in because it's a little bit of a brag. My wife and I quit our jobs and we traveled for a year after that in 2015. We came back. I came back to the same corporate job I was doing sales with, or same company, and basically ran a software team that we were spinning up in our company. I don't work for them anymore. We were a hardware-based company getting into the software world. And then that's where I got in touch with the design team inside of our company. And that's where I also learned design thinking. And this is really where my current story intersects with my past. And I don't know if you're familiar with design thinking, but I'll share anyway, just in case for anyone listening. Design thinking is you take a capital D designer, like someone who has a design degree and does design work for a living, like all day. They have a certain mindset and toolkit, and it's often then exported to people who are not capital D designers like me, who's an engineer by training at least, and often in non-designer situations. So the quintessential place where, well, let me fill in the blank. Then I became part of the design thinking team at the company I used to work for and was training people how to do design thinking, as well as actually using those skills in facilitation for leadership teams and product teams and things like this. And so anyway, to fill that blank back in, some of the people we were teaching to do this would be like the HR teams, for example. Definitely not capital D designers and not doing capital D like product work. They're designing experiences for people or like onboarding and things like that. So we're helping them use the human-centered mindset. This will probably come in later. That's like the mindset piece that I like to highlight the most with design thinking. And then of course, the quintessential design thinking toolkit is, structured exercises with sticky notes. Doesn't have to be, but that's kind of the quintessential one that everybody always thinks of. So anyway, using all of those skills that I learned at the company I was working for, which by the way, I loved, and just decided I wanted to try my own thing. I ended up jumping ship from my company and starting my own business. And there's a few paths along the way, but really the most important one for this conversation is now I'm helping coaches and consultants build and deliver world-class group coaching experiences with primarily those design thinking skills, helping put a focus on the people on the other end of whatever you're doing.
Yeah, talk to me about design thinking a little bit more because you mentioned it a little bit, but I'd love for you to share some ways that other parts of the business might be able to incorporate it. You mentioned HR. How is an HR going to incorporate this stuff? And like, what are some of the cool things you've seen result of integrating this sort of thinking?
Yeah. So the high level, to oversimplify, and sometimes I'm very aware that you can have a hammer so everything looks like a nail, right? But I do think design thinking comes in handy in basically anything you're doing, because anything you're doing probably touches people at some point, whether it's immediately or shortly thereafter. So for example, if you work for a big company and you're in HR, obviously that's human resources, but that will also impact your clients. There's all these companies' clients and the other people of the company, even if you're not directly like helping them with a manager with like HR stuff. There's people everywhere. So that's why I love this human-centered approach. So no matter what you're doing out there, you're interacting with humans at some point. And the main piece here that I like to focus on is we always think we know what those humans need. And design thinking and me, Jake, say, no, you don't. And I've seen this. This is what immediately came to mind is I've seen this time and time again. Let's take a quintessential design example, product development. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had, and I've same conversations with entrepreneurs these days, where they say, I already know my client. I know in our language these days, our ICP, if you will, I know it. I know I've been working this industry for so long. I don't need to go talk to them. But every time they go and actually talk to them, they learn something new and they're blown away. Like, wow, I completely misunderstood what my clients were. So, one example, one of my clients, this is sort of a meta example, he had his clients do research in his group coaching program. He had one who was like 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, has been doing this for years. And he reported back, he said, yeah, he didn't want to go do that, but he did. He came back and he reported it was like gold was coming out of their mouths, is I believe the quote that he used to describe my clients experience getting research. And so it happens at every level. Doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, there's always room to learn more about your clients, the people you're working with, and what you're trying to do for them.
Yeah, a lot of our business, a lot of listeners that are tuned in here, they go through this freelancer stage, they go through the solopreneur stage, and then all of a sudden they are the HR, they are the sales team, they are the fulfillment team, and then they're one stage past that. Right, there's like this 1.5 stage where now maybe they got some help, maybe they got some systems, a contractor, some automation, but they're not like a corporation. They don't have those sort of, established layers of people and leadership. And they're also not quite a freelancer or solopreneur where they have their hands on everything or they're able to impact everything themselves through their own effort. And so there's a sort of in between phase. I would imagine that this sort of thinking could really help someone to move from those phases or to be able to go as businesses scale. The things that worked for them in the previous stage might not work for them in this next stage. It seems like that sort of strategy work or that sort of planning could really help people who are going through those sort of evolution.
Completely. Here's a phrase that comes to mind, and I forgot where I heard this exactly, but life is a series of problems to solve. And if you think about it, that's pretty much true. And the way that was shared, by the way, is it's easy to get frustrated when problems come at us because now we have to solve them. But then if you think about it, well, this is just life. You have problems all the time. And the connection here to design thinking is another framework here. And this is why it applies to everything or could apply to basically everything, is that the frameworks are almost, there's a word, hold on, first principles. They're like first principles where they're really kind of fundamental building blocks that you can apply to everything. And you can make them more specific and bespoke to different industries. But one of my favorites is called the double diamond. And this is quintessential design thinking framework. And if you imagine a double diamond, two next to each other with the points touching, one on the left, one on the right, and you fill in, or what you would write in each of these, on the left, you write in problems, and on the right, you write in solutions. And most people jump to solutions before they even understand the problems. This is number one that I like to teach about like design thinking basics, is make sure you understand what problem you're trying to solve. And so, and I can fill out a little bit more of the double diamond for you in a second. But for that leader who's growing, you're going to have new problems to solve than you did before. And so you need to understand first, before you try to solve them, what problem am I actually trying to solve? What's the biggest problem? To reference The One Thing, which is a great book. Like, what is the one problem that I'm trying to solve right now that is the most impactful or will make the biggest difference in my business? And we have a lot of other things than just the one, but having clarity on the one will then make it easier to know what are the biggest things I need to do to actually continue to grow and scale my business, what problems do I need to solve. Like, just super simple example. If you're like, well, I'm having trouble paying for a VA because I need a new assistant or something like that because now my email inbox is coming at me and all these problems. I need some help. I need some support. Maybe a VA is what you want to go to next, but you can't pay for it. So maybe your problem is actually you need more sales, or maybe it's you need more incoming, or maybe it's you need something else. And so the process, the other piece of this double diamond is they're diamonds, because the first part of the diamond is divergent. It's basically representing like collect information, consider a bunch of things, talk to clients, talk to your staff, and then you narrow down, you converge. So it's divergent and then convergent onto that problem. And then you do it again with solutions. Now, it's obviously way more complicated in reality. It's not a linear process, it's a little more cyclical and messy, but conceptually, it works every time. And I love that mindset. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's really helpful for business leaders to really take away is that how you think about things is likely not the ideal or the optimal way to think about it, right? That's really what I've been learning in business. It was very interesting coming from like the world of sports where it's sort of clear and evident. Oh, this person's taller than me, this person is stronger than me, they have bigger muscles or thighs. It's self-evident how they are able to perform better. But then you get into business and all of a sudden you realize that someone is simply performing better And maybe they're working harder, but if we take that out of it, and all things, everything else is equal, all they're doing is they're just thinking about things differently. They have a different perspective, or eventually, it's not only them that has a different perspective; it's that they're able to get that team to have that perspective, and they're able to multiply that perspective. And so, these sort of strategies or ways of planning or thinking about your business, being strategic in these ways, can sort of help you to provide a different perspective or a different lens over things that you may not see just going through it on the day-to-day sort of basis.
Totally. So to expand on that a little bit, one of the things I love about the tool set side, so we talked about the mindset quite a bit, the tool set side, like structured exercises. And we were just on a call earlier today talking about constraints. And the tool set that I love with these structured exercises is that constraints, and that is my idea of a structured exercise. You're basically building almost a game, if you will. You're building a flow for someone to go down that leaves constraints for them to butt up against. And that forces them to think differently, often more creatively or in a different way than their default is thinking. And often what it's doing too is it's externalizing your thinking. So this is where group dynamics come into play. So if you have a team and you're trying to align everybody on a team, they need to know what you're thinking. And so these exercises are really great to help pull things out so that you can understand them better and your team can understand them better as well at the same time. And then that allows for more creative problem solving or just more effective solution finding, if you will.
Go back to this double diamond. Close that loop for people because you open it, and I was like, my brain was like, "Oh, this is so great," and so you got to close it for me so my brain can stop bugging me. What do we do next? How do we sort of complete that exercise?
Yeah. So that's basically a representation of the design thinking process in super simple form. So you start with the problem. I'll just kind of walk through, I'll put it together for you and tell me if you have other follow ups. So you start with a vague sense of the problem or generally what's going on. And you say, well, what is the problem? There's exercises that can actually help pull this out, like a problem analysis. What are the causes? What are the effects? You understand it better. That could be part of your divergent step, or rather, usually a series of steps, talking to people, etc. Gathering all this data. And then you're saying, okay, what are the biggest problems? And those are usually like the ranking type exercises, or you're prioritizing, you're narrowing down, you're condensing into themes, if you will, and you're understanding your problem better to say, this is the one I want to solve. And that's that middle of where the two diamonds meet. And then you start into the solution phase. And that's where usually this is a lot more messy, I find, than the problem finding phase, because you often have to try multiple things before you get there. And so you say, what do we think we want to do about this problem that we've now identified and decided as a team as the one that we want to solve? What things can we do about this? Let's list them out. Let's discuss them, prioritize them. There's, again, great exercises to help you do this. And then you go and decide on one. So you're converging in, you try it, and then you probably need to repeat again with some feedback. So that's basically it. There's no end point necessarily because things will be constantly changing. If we're talking business specifically, even if you have a perfectly optimized system and you're hitting all your metrics, something always happens. You can't just keep doing that. You always have to be changing and evolving. And then so you basically start the process over again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would imagine that after people and individuals are in business for a while, they experience exactly what you said, that what was working stops working. And so they've got to sort of recycle this process. And I think that the times where I've been the most successful and the people who I've seen be most successful are the ones who can sort of get through that iterative process as quickly as possible, right? Or quicker than others. And it's that sort of iteration, renewal, moving through it, as opposed to a lot of people get stuck in one of those, or they just keep my challenge has been just keep doing the same thing and trying to bludgeon it to success. And instead of going back and saying, hey, what are the other solutions that are here? Let's try that and move forward that way.
Yeah, there's a few of the phrases we use in this world a lot. Bias towards action is one people might have heard before, but so I don't know if it came from design or design thinking explicitly, but it certainly fits in thematically. Like trying things and not, I have a tendency, again, back to my engineer hat, I have a tendency to try to overthink things, over optimize. So I have to catch myself doing this too. And let's just go try that thing. Let's see if it works. There's a great book called Tiny Experiments that if you haven't read it, that's also a great one. But it kind of outlines like how can you learn quickly? Because that's kind of that's the thing that I haven't really talked about either. People talk about failure, right? And if something didn't work, if you try a solution, it doesn't work. Like, oh, I have to go fire that person because they were terrible. Or, oh, I still have this problem. It didn't go away. Or, whatever. That doesn't mean it's a failure. It may not have worked, but I think failure usually means like I did it wrong per se. And I would ask people to change your approach to that and say, what did I learn from that? And now what am I going to do about it? Because that's really all that matters. The past is in the past. The only question you have to answer is, what am I doing next with what I've learned from trying this thing? And I think that can unlock something for a lot of people. Because I think so many people are so, again, I struggle with this too in various ways. But like, I don't want to fail. I don't want to feel like I messed up. I don't want to be rejected, but go and try it, see if it works. And then eventually you'll find something that works better and you can double down on that and expand. So that's my general approach, is this iterative approach to continually improving yourself or your business or your team or whatever.
Yeah, I think this, tiny experiments thing is something that, on an individual level, people can run. And then, treating your business. I've had the habit, or actually, I made the mistake, especially going from a solopreneur to actually having a business, was running it like I was still a solopreneur instead of going, oh, businesses for, as long as this sort of capitalism has ruled, they sort of run it in quarters or 90 days. And there are probably disadvantages to that system as well, and also looking at it in these little shorter sprints or these shorter time constraints, I think is something that can really help people create urgency or energy, or even just to put a container around something so they can look up and go, hey, that didn't work, let's stop doing that and let's adjust and try something.
Well, yeah, that container is huge because I mean, it's notorious at this point, but project management is like, you take like a big construction project, it's never on time. It's never on time. If it is, that's a very vast outlier. And usually the biggest problem I think with these are the scale and the scope is so big. So of course it's going to be wrong. Of course it's going to be late. And so anytime you have a big project, how can you do this smaller? How can you take one step and then evaluate? How can you scope it down and do like an MVP, like a minimum viable product type approach, which is very common in like software, but you can apply that to other places too. But again, it's like, how can I don't know if this works all the time, but I find more often than not, if I think, what am I trying to learn? That's an easier way to, what am I trying to do, if that makes sense. So for example, if you're trying to learn how to make more leads for your business or something like that, or rather, if you're trying to get more leads for your business, instead of asking, how do I get more leads? How can I learn what works to get more leads? What can I test next? And then that leads you down a different path of turning it into more of a, because here's like where the structure comes in. So much of the time, I find myself just trying things, which sometimes works, sometimes don't. And then if it works, I may not have a way to actually learn that, cement it, and then build on it and improve upon it. It just, oh, that worked, but I don't really know why because I wasn't paying attention, if that makes sense. So if you can approach it with, what am I trying to learn? You can set up something to capture that learning, test it, and continue improving. I find that would be a really effective way to build those experiments.
Jake, when we get back from break, I want to ask about some of the, how you've been able to translate the sort of engineering systems, that background into your business, and then also, how you're implementing it with some of your clients. And so we're going to get into that right after this quick break. Hey, y'all, today's episode is brought to you by Amplify Media, and we are a podcast and media production company. Well, we like to think of ourselves as the chief fractional media officer of your company, because chances are, if you're listening to this, you probably have a passion, a product, a mission, a message, some sort of service you're trying to get out to the world, but you might not have the time, the team, or the tech skills to be able to do it. Well, if that's the case, we can help. Go to amplifymedia.com. That's AMPLAFY media.com. You can also check the show notes for the link. And with that, let's get back to Jake. Jake, one of my personal fascinations is AI, both because I feel like it's an existential moment and how lucky we are to sort of come around during this moment, even if it is the beginning of Skynet. I'm like, how silly I would be to be there and then, to be up in the sky and the clouds later on. Like, you could have played around with it and tried it. Like, you could have stopped it, but you didn't, you ignored it. So I look at it as not, maybe it's a necessary evil. And the other side of it, which I'll flavor the conversation with a little bit, is I've seen, and once again, it's one of these podcast statistics, so who knows, but there have been studies presented in the, online of people losing their cognitive abilities after, that they're going, like, experiencing cognitive decline after using AI. And so it's this really interesting, sort of dichotomy, really, right? Because, and also as a business owner, if you're not utilizing and leveraging it, it's also probably very likely that you're getting left behind in some sort of capacity. So, how have you been approaching AI, and given all that, what sort of things have you, found to be helpful?
Yeah, this is a great question that I've been thinking, I have all the same feelings. Is it Skynet? Am I getting dumber? And, you know, I feel like this is what they talk about. The same thing happened when radio came out, but this feels different. But is it different? I don't know. So I don't know how to weigh in on that aspect. But I will tell you, I've been very resistant to AI until, I don't know, 5 months ago at this point, something, or, springtime this year. And I don't know what clicked for me. It just felt like I need to try this. It's here. It's not going away, instead of resisting it, because it felt like cheating, or it felt like, I don't know. It's like the buzzy thing. Is this real? I can't articulate why, but when I tried it, it started like unlocking all these things for me. And again, that kicked in with my like technology brain. I'm like, why my like engineering, technology, process driven brain? Throughout my entire career, I have helped do things like this. Like way back, my first job was a childcare company, and I was a receptionist for a period of time in Gainesville, Florida. And we were counting the tills, like where the money's kept, like manually, calculators. I'm like, what are you guys doing? And I was in high school. I'm like, can we use Excel? So like eventually I got them convinced of that. So anyway, this is just an extrapolation off of that. And it was surprising to me that it took so long. And so fast forward today. So I help people build world-class group coaching experiences, and that has to do with bringing people together. And it feels like AI is poised to replace a lot of what we do. Like, can it be a coach right now? Not quite, but like there's some interesting applications that gets somewhere along that trajectory, right? I don't know where it ends, but my question for myself became, how could this enhance the human element of what we're doing rather than replace it? And I'll tell you a little bit of how my wife and I run our marriage. We do what we call our State of the Union, like the basically like workshops. So State of the Union play on, the whatever, the presidency, State of the Union, which maybe is a tricky thing these days. That's not why. It's just a fun name. And it's basically a workshop where we can zoom out and look big picture. So you can do things like this in your businesses too, those of you listening, or your marriages. I recommend it, by the way. And one of the main exercises we do is called the Wheel of Life. Now, we call it pillars, but it's most commonly known as the Wheel of Life, which is you take your life into different aspects. Like you have your marriage, you have your kids and your family, perhaps, if you have kids, you have friends, you have health, you have wealth, you have your work. And you talk about those, and you rank them individually. So you start individually and you rank them. And then you come together and you talk about where you're different, where the big concerning points are, what's going really well. And eventually it leads to kind of the same thing we were talking about before the break. What do we want to do next? What thing do we want to try next? What experiment do we want to try? What thing do we want to try to improve? Whatever it may be, right? And this has been going great and they work well. And I thought, how could I make this better? Because one of my favorite things to do with AI is help me understand myself better. And I started to form this hypothesis of the main problem getting in the way of most communication that I see, especially with group programs, is people don't understand themselves, what they want, what they value, what their needs are, whatever the question you have for them. It could be as simple as, what do you want to do? What do you want to do for lunch? Most people don't even know themselves. That's why those conversations are so hard and frustrating so much of the time. And so I thought to myself, how can I inject AI into this process as a proxy for starting to explore more of the professional side? And effectively, what I did, I used Claude to build a conversation partner that would act as an advisor, a challenger, and therapist is too strong, but just helping you like poke deeper on some of the responses you're getting. So basically tease up a few things. I won't go through the whole process, but it's basically how things going in general, and it will pull that through to the specific questions. And then it'll ask you for each of the pillars, rank it, and then explain why. And then I have some advisors built in, experts in each of those areas. So for parenting, I love Dr. Becky. I have a Dr. Becky profile. What might she like? What are the things that she cares about that she would help coach somebody on? And like, what are her opinions on things? And then use that to inject some questions and follow up. And then one of my favorite things that I found that I didn't expect is it helped. Obviously, it helped me think through it because we're practicing it before just doing it live. So that's like just a benefit by itself. It's kind of like, hey, drink this pill to prevent a hangover with like a gallon of water. Well, maybe it's the gallon of water, not the pill, that's actually helping you with your hangover. It's kind of the same thing here. Just the practice of talking about it first helps you. But what I found really useful is it gave me really concise and accurate ways to describe what I thought, so I could take it to my wife and we could just get to the point really quick and then dive deep on what we want to do about it, or dive deep into bigger questions. So anyway, to summarize, what I loved about this was it was fun. It actually helped us communicate better because it helped us think first and then find a concise way to communicate to each other. And it actually helped us get the work done faster in a deeper way than we were before, at least in the live portion. Yes, you have to spend some time outside, but that made that live portion. And this, for anybody having a business, anytime you have a meeting, find a way to make that meeting actually worthwhile and maximize the benefit of being live. So if that, like, everybody probably knows that meeting could have been an email. Please don't do those kinds of meetings. Instead, turn it to what actually is useful for having us here that we actually need to talk about. And so, anyway, I'm kind of throwing a lot of things out there, but it was great. And now I have all these other ideas on how can we actually enhance human communication by primarily, at least for now, helping us think deeper for ourselves. That's kind of like the bottom line for me, is like the first step for me. So, anyway.
Yeah, well, I think the big difference in how I see people not using it correctly, but if there is a difference, and that is that if you can use it to ask you questions and to allow you to think more as opposed to it telling you what to think or giving you what to write, right? If you can be utilizing, like you said, in some sort of strategic advisory capacity, or to ask you, not just tell you how to, like, what to do as a parent, but like to ask you questions and figure out what's important, and who's important, all those sort of things are really helpful, as opposed to just write me an email that says I want to fire you.
Yes. I was talking to somebody about this the other day too. And I have this opinion that I've been forming more and more lately, that you should not be asking AI for opinions. There might be some ways you can get some useful opinions, but I find every time when I say, okay, well, what about this? And it says, oh, you're right. That's a great idea. And then I go, oh, what about this? A completely opposite idea. Oh, you know what? On second thought, you're right. That's a great idea. And I'm sure there's some ways to design around that, at least to a certain degree. But AI is not actually intelligent. It mocks intelligence, or it is a mock up of intelligence, or a mockery of intelligence too, I suppose, all the above. But that's really hard to keep in mind because it feels like it understands me and it knows, but it doesn't. It really doesn't. It's just filling in the blanks on whatever. It's basically a super advanced autocomplete, right? So,
You could probably say this about anything, but South Park has a great episode on that. And that's exactly it. Where I think it's Eric's dad is talking into the AI about business ideas, and he's just like, "Honey, it's just one more thing, one more tweak," and then she finally figures it out, and she, tells it like some terrible idea, and ChatGPT says exactly what he said. He's like, "That's a great idea," and she's like, "We're so screwed." you know. Jake, I've got two questions for you. The first is, if people want to get more involved with what you have going on, follow up with you, go deeper in your world, where's the best place for people to go?
yeah, best place you can go is course.intentioncraft.com. That'll take you to my crash course. And I'm trying to dump all of my principles, my beliefs, my teachings into that. So, like the things we were talking about today, you'll get more of those and deeper. And yeah, so course.intentioncraft.com is the best way. And then if you want to get in touch with me directly, you can just reply to any of those and it'll come straight to me. I'd love to hear from you.
Amazing. And we'll link all that up in the show notes as always. Jake, last question is, in your opinion, what is the secret to scaling a business?
Okay, so this may not be the secret, but this is certainly a piece of it. And one of my favorite drums to beat is fun. So this is almost going back to, like, why are you trying to scale, or why you're trying to do anything. But for me, life is about having fun. It's not only about having fun, but that's a huge part of it. And if we're having fun, we're doing more work, or doing better work rather. And so if you specifically are asking about scaling, if you can find a way to make that fun, because I think it's the default is stress when you're scaling. It's probably stress. There's new problems to solve. There's more problems to solve. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm having to grow as a person, and that's difficult and stressful. So think about, how can we make this fun? How can we make it more human?